How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to take a look at this tropical disturbance, which now has close to a moderate chance of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle in the Gulf of Mexico, and determine if this will make landfall as a tropical storm along the southern Texas coast later into this weekend. And we'll also take a look at the main development region, where there is a growing possibility that we could see Tropical Storm Earl by next week, as stated by the GFS computer model. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content. So let's begin. Taking a look at the Atlantic, at the entire northern Atlantic at this time, the GFS model forecast. And as you can see, we are seeing an increased amount of convection right now throughout the main development region, which is a stark contrast from what we've been seeing over the past several weeks, where it's been fairly stable. But we are also taking a look at this disturbance that's pretty much developing out of a gyre that's going on right around Central America that could potentially develop into Tropical Storm Danielle as this heads further northwestward. So let's focus on that first. So let's actually zoom into the Gulf of Mexico, where we will get a better idea of how this tropical storm will originate from. And you see that we will see a well-defined low pressure system develop just off the Yucatan Peninsula and eventually move into the Yucatan Peninsula. And as you can see, there is an enhanced amount of convection right around the southern Gulf of Mexico, and this is expected to move towards a northwest direction as a result of strong ridging that's building right around the eastern portion of the Gulf of Mexico. So this does have a possibility of moving into Texas. So even if this doesn't develop into Tropical Storm Danielle, there's still a high probability that you will experience heavy rainfall associated with this area of convection. So it's something, at least something to keep in mind heading into this weekend along the coast of Texas and even along the coast of Mexico as well, where this convection is expected to pretty much hug the immediate coast of Mexico and Texas. And if I were to continue to move forward, while the GFS model at this point does not currently want to develop really any sort of tropical depression or tropical storm or even a low pressure system that's very well defined enough for the GFS model to pretty much show it on the GFS forecast model map, we still do see that the convection does move northward, and currently the National Hurricane Center is giving this a 30% chance of developing within the next 5 days. And I wouldn't be surprised if that increases if the computer models do detect that the conditions could potentially be favorable enough for this area of convection to develop a well-defined and small center circulation where all that energy could converge towards, and where the wind speed will increase as a result of a lower air pressure along the surface. So we're going to need to wait and see how this convection will build and organize over the next couple of hours to really determine if this does have a good possibility of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle. Currently the chances on more the lower to moderate end, but we still easily could see that chance increase. So it's definitely something to be aware of along the coast of Texas and Mexico at this time. The conditions that will play a role in determining if we will see Tropical Storm Danielle is, of course, the upper level winds. If we were to take a look at that, while there is a strong amount of upper level winds just located to the north of where this area of convection would be, where we do see very strong upper level winds equivalent to right around 50 knots, right around the 200 millibar portion of that, where the air pressure is 200 millibars. We do see an enhanced amount of wind shear throughout the Gulf of Mexico as well, associated with an upper level low that's located over Mexico at this time, and a little bit of an upper level high located just to the south of it. However, if we were to look along the immediate coast of Mexico and even the extreme southern portion of Texas, we do see that in this small area the wind shear is light. And if this area of convection is able to pretty much center itself to the point where it could avoid a lot of the upper level winds just to the east and just to the north of it, in this small area, then we could easily see this area of convection organize itself and create enough thunderstorm activity for the pressure to drop and well-defined center circulation to develop potentially into tropical depression or tropical storm. But we need to wait and see how this upper level low will move, because that will be key in determining if tropical storm Danielle develops and makes landfall along the Texas coast. At this point, it seems like the wind shear is a little bit too strong for this area of convection to handle, based on what a GFS model is stating and even based on what the European model is stating. However, there's still, I'd say, a pretty moderate possibility we could see that wind shear decrease or be a little bit less than what the computer models are expecting, and we could see that area of light wind shear be a little bit larger, which would allow this area of convection to create enough thunderstorm activity and to drop the air pressure just enough for enough rotation to occur around the center circulation. So that's definitely something we're going to need to pay attention to over the next several hours. Now, another thing is, of course, the amount of humidity, the relative humidity in the atmosphere. And you see that it won't really be much of an issue. I'd say there is a little bit of stable air just to the north of where this area of convection is. However, it isn't a highly concentrated amount of stable air, so this area of moisture could easily fend off this somewhat stable air that's just to the north of it and pretty much shield itself from that dry air. And we do see that dry air increases as it heads further northward, so I don't think the humidity will necessarily be the problem. Really, the only few factors that would inhibit this area of convection from developing is, of course, the upper level winds, and of course how close it moves along the coast, because that's going to be another key component that could either benefit or inhibit this area of convection from developing into a tropical depression or a tropical storm. It's the amount of land interaction, and since this is expected to hug the coast as a result of a big ridge building along the southeast United States, and this could easily move a little bit too close to the Mexican coastline, and that would create more friction around the center of circulation for enough convergence and rotation to occur for the wind speed to increase enough for a tropical storm to develop. However, if this storm manages to stay just enough offshore and is able to avoid the wind shear while doing that, then this does have a much higher possibility of developing into a tropical storm. But it's going to need to be in this very small specific area where the conditions will be just right, where it's able to avoid the wind shear just to the east of it. However, it's able to avoid a high amount of land interaction just to the west of it, as well as it's going to need to be in a fairly specific area if this area of convection wants to develop into tropical storm Danielle. So that's something we're going to need to pay close attention to. And of course, time won't be in its favor, because this will move northward this will move at a relatively average pace, but it's going to be very close to the coast, so there won't be a lot of time for this area of convection to organize itself before it makes landfall, which is another thing. Time, the land interaction, as well as the questionable amount of upper level winds that are expected to inhibit this storm will be key factors in determining if this does develop into tropical storm Danielle. So we're just going to need to wait and see. At this point, the chances right around moderate to low chance, maybe more on the lower end of a moderate chance, but it's definitely something to be aware of, because even if this doesn't develop, it still could bring very much beneficial rain to a lot of Texas, which you guys currently are in a severe drought right now, but it still could bring some havoc along the coast of Mexico and Texas with some flash flooding possibilities. So it's definitely something you want to keep in mind head into this weekend and into early next week. Now, moving on to our next possibility of a tropical storm, which would be later next week in the main development region, and it could potentially become tropical storm Earl. Let's shift our focus more to the entirety of the northern Atlantic at this time. And if we were to take a look at the main development region, we do see a little bit of convection just to the south of the main development region, and we do see an enhanced amount of convection just off the African coast at this time. Now, this area of convection isn't expected to develop into anything, as it seems like it just doesn't have enough lift, or there isn't enough instability really for this area of convection to do much of anything. And plus, it's a little bit too far south for the Coriolis effect to have a major impact when it comes to the amount of rotation around what would be a center of circulation. So that's another thing that's going to inhibit it. But if I were to continue to move forward, that area of convection that's right along the African coast, that's expected to become our next concern into next week, because you see that this area of convection will linger along the coast for several days, and then we will see another trough move through coming off the African coast, I'd say by right around the Saturday to Sunday time frame, and that will be the tropical wave that could potentially develop into tropical storm Earl. If I were to continue to move forward, we do see that this does strengthen gradually as this heads further eastward, and then quickly strengthens once it gets closer to the Caribbean, which would definitely be a major concern. But taking a look at the forecast hour, we do see, of course, it's very far out, pretty much 10 days out. So there's still a lot of time to iron out the forecast. But even if we were to look at a more manageable time period, right around the 6-day mark, we do see a well-defined low pressure system in the main development region. And that's always a concern, because if we do see a low pressure like that in the main development region during one of the more active months of the hurricane season, it's always a concern. So the fact that GFS model wants to bring at least a very well organized tropical wave into the main development region is something to be concerned about. And if we were to take a look at the upper level winds that are expected right around by next week, we do see that the upper level winds will be relatively light throughout the main development region, which is another major concern, because if this wind shear is light enough, we could see this area of convection really organize itself to a point where it could become tropical storm Earl or Danielle if this tropical disturbance doesn't come for fruition within the next couple of days in the southern Gulf of Mexico. So we're just gonna have to wait and see. And if we were to take a look at the amount of upper level winds, not the upper level winds, the relative humidity, but in the mid levels of the atmosphere, that's when things get a little bit more questionable, because like I've been saying, it's been very dry throughout the main development region over the past several weeks. And we do see that while this tropical wave is able to pretty much fend off a lot of this dry air just to the north of it, we do see that this dry air is highly concentrated, and we still do see quite a bit of dry air just to the west of this low pressure system, which would definitely be a major inhibiting factor if this dry air were to entrain the center circulation. However, the GFS model does believe that this small center circulation will be able to be small enough to a point where it won't absorb a lot of dry air around it. So that's only something to keep in mind. But in terms of what the European model is stating at this time, we do see that the European model does believe that dry air will win out. It does bring a low pressure system in the main development region, but eventually does fizzle it out, as it seems like dry air is a little bit too much. But the fact that the GFS model wants to develop a tropical storm by late next week, it's definitely something to be concerned about. We just need to wait and see how much stable air there will be, which will take several days to really determine that. But there is certainly that possibility we could see tropical storm Danielle or Earl by next week in the main development region. So make sure to pay close attention to that. In terms of what the National Hurricane Center is stating, like I said, there's still a 30% chance of development, which is considered low, but I wouldn't be surprised if that increases over the next couple of hours. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And taking a look at the water vapor energy, here's our disturbance. You see that there isn't a lot of convection going on, but I do expect that to change as this heads further northwestward once it does encounter an area where there's a little bit less stability and the upper level winds will be a little bit weaker. So that's something to keep in mind. And taking a look at what the GFS model the ensemble members are stating, and we do see that a decent amount of them with this next tropical wave do want to strengthen it quite a bit to at least tropical storm force strength, which is definitely interesting. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. We do have another tropical wave that fizzles out, and this tropical wave also might be something to pay close attention to because we do have some ensemble members wanting to develop that into tropical storm. But at this point, the main GFS computer model isn't developing anything, but it's at least something to be aware of over the next several days as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that around the Caribbean, because there's certainly a higher possibility we could see tropical storm Danielle or Earl within the very near future. Now, taking a look at my forecasts, you do see that tropical storm Earl is a possibility. If it were to develop, it'll take sort of this track, which is a little bit more of a concern that it's not moving a little bit further northward to avoid the Caribbean. It's instead going straight towards the Caribbean as a result of a strong amount of ridging just to the north of it. So it's definitely something to be aware of into next week for the Caribbean, and tropical storm Danielle could be possible soon in the Gulf of Mexico. So make sure to keep in mind of that. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.